Hi, welcome to Messier Mantra. I'm your host, Mike Messier. On this episode, we have a very special guest, a good friend of mine too. Her name is Judith, and let me say this right, Blacquier. Close?
Awesome.
Blacquier?
Awesome. Yes.
And we've described you on previous episodes as a healing arts practitioner. Would that be accurate?
Right. That's a good term.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know you've been going through some metamorphosis or some new personal insights regarding sharing what you do with people. Would that be accurate? Mm-hmm. Maybe you want to talk about that for a minute.
Yeah. Well, actually, I mentioned to you before the show that I thought rather than talk about what I do, I would actually do what I do on the show. And then I talked about how, I just start breathing and get into like a meditative state. And you said, well, it's a talk show, so you don't really want to just do a meditation.
I'm just going to do this meditating on the Messier, the Messier meditation with Judith Blacquier.
Right. So I realized how funny that would be that I'm saying, okay, let's just sit here for the whole interview and I'll just go into my meditation.
Right. And I'll sit with the passages from the Bhagavad Gita and burn some incense.
Right.
And play some Jim Croce albums.
Right. And the audience can eat popcorn and just watch us do that. So anyway, but I do want to say that I trained in breath work as part of my original trainings. So if my breath gets weird at times, that's my sort of touchstone of checking in with myself and being present. Because when I do work with people, I do, in a sense, working as a healer.
Right.
But it's not like I'm not a doctor. I'm not like, I don't give prescriptions or medicine or anything. But it's more an energetic healing, or spiritual healing, or however you want to talk about it. It's sort of not. It's not in the physical world. It's from the invisible world. So anyway, the breath is really a key part to it.
As opposed to, say, a chiropractor or a physical therapist for someone who might have an injury or discomfort, you're going towards more of the soul, the mind, the spirit. Is that fair to say?
Good one, Mike. Good one.
Be here all day.
Yeah.
Now, so as you said, someone's watching the Messier Mantra. They just tapped in, and maybe, they're watching us talk, and they don't really know the hands-on or the specifics or the nuts and bolts, as I like to say, about certain topics. So if someone's watching, they're like, hey, you know what? I've had a stressful day. My kids are crying, and I just took them to soccer practice, or my husband's being a jerk, or my grandmother, something happened, so on and so forth. Or maybe someone, let's take it from that. So just say a daily grind, like someone has that daily task or that daily issue, whether they're a 9-to-5 worker or whatever, but they just had a rough day, and they happen to be alone right now catching the show. What would you say to them, or how would you share an experience to just kind of relax them? Yeah,
good one. That reminds me to say right off the bat that what I do, what I offer is not better than what other people do or offer. It's almost like, imagine that you're in your car and your car breaks down. Now, who's more important to you at that time, a mechanic or someone like me?
Right.
The mechanic. So there's no scale of, well, this is way better, or she is way more important than the mechanic or the person that, bakes the bread. It's like, it's all relevant to what you're looking for, what's coming up in your life. What I talk about with people is that, you're in the middle of a transformation or a healing when stuff starts hitting the fan.
Right.
Like you've got an ache, a pain, something isn't going well in your life, you lost your job. Some people come to me when they're about to go into labor, they're getting close to labor, they're freaking out. And the work is about sort of transforming something stressful or difficult or an issue and getting through to the other side. Usually we can handle it on our own, but sometimes we just feel like, wow, how do I get through this to the other side without, you know, like just imploding or exploding.
And that's what we see with a lot of people, and it doesn't have to be, you know, society's bad guys, but it's people that have road rage, or they, you know, could be talking ill towards a friend or a family member. And so people that we think are just great people, our neighbors, our friends, our family members, they have these moments. We all have these moments of conflict and inner turmoil, which get manifested towards people we care about. And people snap is the term. You know, and is there things that people can do in advance of having a bad issue? You know, like they can kind of have a regular series of meditations or yoga or prayer, or is that something that you would talk about?
Well, you brought up a great point. Oh, this is going well.
Yeah,
because I feel like, I was like, what are we going to talk about?
Sure.
And I forgot that, as we did last time, it's just like you say something reminds me of something else. But so you mentioned, like, it's almost like there's this idea that, you know, when we do spiritual work, or, you know, we go to church or we connect to the divine, that there's this idea that we're going to become totally pure. Right. That we're going to just heal ourselves completely, and we're going to be like saints. Right. We're going to be walking around on a cloud with everybody.
Or on water, so to speak.
Yeah, water. We're not going to get mad. We're not going to get mad. We're not going to get stressed. We're not going to lose it. But the reality is that we are here, and part of what helps us to grow and expand is that stuff hits the fan sometimes. Right. And then the really important piece of maybe talking about this is, rather than say, oh, we're going to heal you so that you're perfect, so that you're a saint. Right. It's more like waking us up to see, oh yeah, well, how do I want to handle that? Right. Like a lot of times we're sleepwalking through life. Yeah. And we don't really, you know, something happens, we just react. We're just like zombies in a sense. And so I use the word healing more as awakening up, an awakening, or becoming more authentic, right? Like more real, more truthful. And one of the biggest things, the issue about that is that as we start to be more authentic and real and show up, we find out that there's some parts of us that we don't really like.
Oh, of course. Oh, right.
You know, there is some darkness in us, or there is this or that. But as I said, we aren't saints. So, you know, if we start on a spiritual path, what happens is we start beating ourselves up more and more and more and more, and we end up, you know, just paralyzed.
Well, for me, I can speak for myself. Sometimes I'll be having a good run of what I would deem success for myself, whether it's a screenplay or a theater piece or whatever it might be, and then I kind of will have these triggers like, well, gee, what if I had done this other project 5, 10, 15 years earlier, as I'm doing this one right now? Wouldn't that previous project have been a success as this one is starting to be? Or a comparison to someone else. Well, such and such, you know, for film people, it's always Tarantino or whoever, Spike Lee, or an actor would say Denzel Washington, or an actress might like Nicole Kidman or Meryl Streep is always the hugest parameter. So if someone were to compare themselves continuously to these higher echelon of people who've achieved success, whether through good fortune or luck or hard work, most likely, if we always compare ourselves to these other people, or what could have been had I done this, or had I, you always hear people say, if I had known 20 years ago what I know now, or, you know, how do people, you think, do you have any insights or thoughts of how do people get over that and just enjoy what they're doing? But not giving up improvement for being better.
Yeah, good one, Mike.
I try.
Yeah. That brings me to remember the idea that you know, I quote the Bible sometimes, because I think that Jesus was a healer. Right. I think that as I said in past interviews, I feel like we flow in divine, we flow in life force energy, and it flows in us. So it's a paradox.
Right.
So I think there's a lot of things in the Bible that I got to be careful. I'm forgetting that I'm like, saying this right out to everybody. I don't want to like step on anybody's toes.
Well, I mean, let's just jump in right there. You can step on people's toes. Like on Messier Mantra, for the most part, with certain considerations to, vulgarity and so forth, it's freedom of thought and, just not to cut your vibe, but I mean, sometimes I think in our society, especially with our friends' social media platform, everyone is so concerned with, I don't want to offend, or I would mention Jesus or Buddha or whatever I want to talk about, or politics, or whatever, and people don't want to offend. But if people are afraid to offend, then who's actually doing stuff?
Oh my gosh.
The offensive.
Yeah.
Like the people that don't care what they think or say, are, not to get political by will, our president-elect, or even the person that he defeated in the election, they'll do what they want. They'll be offensive. They'll offend us. They'll say whatever they want. They'll do illegal activities under the guise of being a politician. But for the average Joe and Joanne, in wherever the hell, Rhode Island or Massachusetts. Yeah, I know. Blank that out. But we are all afraid to commit some crime of offending.
Right.
Whereas the people that are running the ship, they have no care, apparently.
Oh, my gosh. Good point. Good point.
Thanks.
Although 2 points that I want to jump off with from that. Exactly what you just said was, when I was watching the debates and all, I thought, that one candidate is just giving us all this intellectual information.
Right.
And I could feel myself with my eyes like glazing over, like, oh my gosh, too much information.
Right.
It's all information. And it wasn't that, it wasn't sort of embodied. The work that I realized I needed for myself was, how do I actually live not just like from my head up?
Right.
In a lot of our teaching in schools, we're kind of dealing with kids as though they're just brains. We're not dealing with them as though they're whole people. They have hearts, they have feelings. So I really think that's an important point. The other point, now I'm getting lost like I did before. There's all these different, so the other idea, okay, so you brought that up about when I said, I don't want to mention the Bible, I don't want to step on people's toes. So this is another issue that I find in my life, and I really don't want to even be talking about this as like, I'm a healer.
Sure.
I do this work. I want to talk about it as like I'm a human being.
Yes.
And these issues are just, this is what life is about, that we almost like tone down ourselves.
Oh, all the time.
To not step on people's toes. And that's what you were saying, and that's what I feel like what happened with the election was there was somebody that didn't tone down anything.
Amped up almost.
And they were almost seen as more authentic than the person that was like the talking head.
Right.
And so, I think people were, myself even, I mean, not to say that that's who I voted for, but I was like, you know what? This person is like putting me into a trance, a daze.
Right.
Because there's so much information that I cannot wrap my brain around. And I think that's how I grew up. It was like being a child, being authentic, knowing what I liked, what I don't like, what it feels like. I mean, and that all came from what it felt like to me. Not my brain, but what's the feeling? What's the feeling? What's my gut feeling? What's my heart say? And that was kind of trained out of me.
Trained out, not
trained
encouraged.
out.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that by the time I was an adult, I didn't really know what I liked or what I didn't like.
Wow.
Because it was like, what should I like? What should I be thinking? What should I be feeling? So part of healing, in a sense, is getting back to like, wow, I'm a human being, I'm not perfect, and I have a way to live. And it's almost like, what is the way to live? And there's actually a what is it called? Maybe it's a mantra.
Yes.
a way to live. It's how does this feel to me?
Right.
You know, in one of my trainings, I know I'm like way all over the place.
That's fine.
In one of my trainings, and I think you have to watch some previous episodes to see, oh, who am I? What do I do? Why do I do what I do?
Right.
The audience might not know that I was diagnosed with a life-threatening illness at age 40. Told if it came back, it was terminal. And then I had a dream to see a medicine person, and that sort of, my life sort of transformed from there.
Right.
But now I said all that, and where was I going with this?
Well, you were kind of stifled as a child, not encouraged to be yourself.
I remembered, or not stifled like I don't think stifled any more than anyone else.
Okay.
But I think part of the education of children is we bring them from just like playing, being authentic to now, or even from the beginning, it's like don't feel sad when you actually feel sad.
Right.
Don't be
cry.
mad when you're mad. So we kind of educate out of children how to just exist in their human body, you know, and how to go towards what they like. Like, oh, I feel good around this person.
Right.
And we kind of educate that out of them. So they're walking around like, who should I hang with?
Right.
Rather than, oh, I like this person and it feels good to me. But the issue that when I started my path to find healing for myself at age 40, I went to this training, and they had someone stand up in front of the room, and they had that person close their eyes, and they went like this to the person. They touched his arm,
Right.
and they said, "How did you? What just happened?" And he said, "Well, you touched my arm." And they said, "How did you know that?" And he said, "Because I felt it." So we're trying to, in healing work, we are actually trying to get back to our own innate sense of how to live.
Right.
And when we do that, you know, we know, even with our eyes closed, that someone brushed past us or brushed our arm. You know, and we begin to back up into ourselves and realize, wow, I know how to live, I know how to heal myself, I know how to connect with the right people, I know how to make the right decisions.
Right.
If we kind of back into ourselves, you know, come back to our, I mean, I'm
Return to innocence, Enya, yeah. 1991.
But come back to ourselves, return to our, you know, to like ourselves. And another way to talk about it is, you know, get rooted, you know.
What's rooted?
Rooted,
okay.
like trees.
Yes.
You know, we're like trees with our roots in the earth, growing tall up to the sun. But what happens as we're educated, it's like, oh my, how am I supposed to live? And we kind of leave our root system, we leave where we're growing, and we keep taking ourselves out of the nurturing support, which is just like divine, you know.
Let me ask you about this.
I'm getting kind of...
No, it's all right. On the
You following that?
Yeah, I do. We have about 9 minutes left, and so I want to cover a topic that you touched upon. So kids, children,
yeah.
are two things come to mind, probably a lot, but 20 minutes of recess, 30 minutes of recess if they're lucky. You don't get an hour anymore, that's for sure, for these kids. I don't know if you ever did for children, but for a kid to be in the classroom, there's nothing wrong with learning. Let's get that out there. You have to learn English, math, all the subjects are important, social studies, and so forth. But for the kid to get 5-6 hours of learning, waking up, a lot of these kids, you know, wake up at 6:30 in the morning, the latest 7:30, probably, you know, 6-7 a.m., which I believe it's been proven that that's not even good for kids. Like the childhood brain is not really clicking in till 9 or 10 in the morning. So if we made that adjustment, might be better for the kids, but it would throw the whole bus system off, and all the parents would have to go to work later, and so on and so. So we're kind of stuck with that. So the kids have to go to school half groggy, and they have to learn a subject matter, whether it's physical education first, where they're running around and they're still tired, or if they get nailed with the toughest class for them, math, whatever. And then the kid has that issue. So they're all in the classroom, and then the second issue that I remember is when I was a kid, we were assigned books, you know, your books.
Yeah.
And in the books, if you, God forbid, rake a pencil mark or a highlighter or a pen gets straight or you bend a page, at the end of the school year, these books are kind of looked at by the teachers. I don't know if they still do this, but like the books are kind of examined by the teachers. And if you got a book with a quality of 3, out of 4, like even if you got the book and it was half junkied up already, and you're penalized for junking it up even more, and then your parents have to pay the fine. So you basically, from the get-go, you're encouraged, like, this book is this prestigious thing, this immaculate thing, you're not allowed to touch it. And if you wanted to highlight a page or make a stray mark for your own learning, that's not encouraged. You would have to take a piece of paper, write it down. I guess, kids these days are just going to take a smartphone and take a picture of the book and then cross-reference it on the internet, whatever they're learning or trying to learn. So my point is this: everything's screwed up. But I guess my thought is, how do even adults, 20, 30 years past childhood, that are watching this and whatever I said made some sense to them, and they say, gee whiz, in 7 minutes or less, how do you give them some type of remedy or help?
Oh, great point. Well, thank you. Just listening, it brought me back to really the way I was beginning the interview was about not just talking about what I do,
Right.
but actually, giving our audience a way to connect to to healing, to finding healing in their life. And one of the things that I've found that's important is, for people getting a cancer diagnosis or getting bad news or something. One of the key things to do is actually to surrender.
Right.
Because as soon as you surrender to what life, whatever it is coming at you, as soon as you surrender, you relax, you breathe, and then you can actually take action. But what happens to us is we get a diagnosis of something, and people say to us, well, you have to fight it. You have to fight, you have to fight. And it turns out that we go into this mode of like fighting and action, but we have to sort of surrender to actually get into a place of peace within ourselves, to find the strength to actually take the action. You have to kind of say, all right, I'm like gonna just relax for a moment, I'm gonna breathe, I'm going to center myself. And when you go into that surrendered place, you can actually take much better action than if you are, it's sort of like athletes going into the zone.
Right.
Right? It's all a mental game. If you're not relaxed and breathing and you try to do something, you just sort of blow up very quickly.
Yeah.
But if you can center yourself, kind of surrender to the fact that, you are about to do this daunting thing.
Right.
And then you can do it. You can leap over the barrier or whatever. There'll be a pathway for you.
Right.
One of the things I don't think I mentioned in the last interviews, and it's a little bit disturbing, but I had a stillborn daughter, and I went up to deliver her up in Boston at a really big Boston hospital that specializes in at-risk pregnancies. So they have grief counselors, and they had everyone on board. So I went up there, and it turns out what they could offer me as far as grief counseling was, let's talk about it.
Okay.
It'll get better. Sort of telling me to stuff like, you'll get through it. When actually, the gift of the experience was not that it was, it was a horrendous experience, but thinking back, what happened to me was at one point, I just went into this feeling like, I don't think I can do this. I just went into that kind of surrender, relaxing mode of, I give up. You know, I don't think I can do this. As soon as I got to that place, I saw out of the corner of my eye, there was the blinds, vertical blinds were closed. There was one blind, one vertical slat was missing. And just as I felt like, I don't know if I can do this, I look over and a feather drops right down through the whole length of that missing vertical blind.
Right.
You know, the backdrop is the skyscrapers are in the background, and I watch that feather. And it sort of, feathers are always for me like, oh, you know, like they're a good sign for me. So I got this information that almost like it's going to be okay.
Right.
Now what happens is life sort of throws things like that at us. It's called synchronicity, actually, and that's the name of my work,
right.
Synchronicity and Company. But life throws things like that to us, and sort of for a moment I felt like things are going to be okay. But then we forget.
Right.
We forget that there are all these signs, and we feel like we're so alone. But anyway, that was what, for some reason I thought to mention that. But is that what we were talking about?
We're talking about I was asking about how would someone watching who had traumatic childhood, or just not even traumatic, but just bad. How do people watching that are even kids now, like a 13, 14, but we're kind of running out of time, so we have to catch on the next episode.
Can I make a quick
Sure.
point? The other point that I wanted to make was that part of in the healing practice that I offer, it's almost like we're going in, I'll quote the Bible again. Jesus says, lest you be reborn, you cannot enter the kingdom of heaven. You must die in order to be reborn. So there's a sense of what I walk people through in a session, and what I could walk people through right now if we're in any tension or difficulty of not knowing what decision to make, or anything stressful, is to almost like to just rest, to just relax, to just almost like take a breather. Lay down, sit in a chair, close your eyes, shut off media.
Yes, that's
Don't
hard.
shut off this program yet. But
not us, but
just
the
sort of
social
like
media,
shut down and relax for a moment, and guidance comes.
Right.
I mean, the information will come of what to do next and how to deal with things. But we take this idea that we have to do. And first, there's a moment of pause.
Well, we have to pause right now because we're running out of time.
All right.
But Judith, we'll have you in the next episode and talk even more.
Yay. Thank you. Nice to see you.
Thanks for watching Messier Mantra. We'll see you next time.